And we're good to go. Recording, awesome. So I've opened up actually our first assignment, and yes, I do actually start you off with a template that shows at least a lot of the commands that we'll be using. And the best way to find that is, of course, on the Miro page. If you go to the very top to our Google Drive, you'll click on the Google Drive. It'll bring up our Google Drive, and keep in mind I do use this for multiple classes, so make sure you click on ARC 1315. And you'll see that there's a couple of Rhino files. If you still have Rhino 7, which hopefully nobody does, these are, as you can see, a little bit older. But basic Rhino command template, that's the one that you want. So you can right click and of course download. Now that's essentially what I have open today. For our first assignment, I've actually pinned it up on Miro and I've passed it around, so if you'd like a physical copy, just let me know after the video and I'll get you that physical copy. But it is also here on Miro and it is also on Canvas, so I mean fail safe, it's at least 3 places. But relatively speaking, let's at least just go over exercise 1, called and entitled Basic Modeling and Diagramming. Of course, Rhino 3D and Rhino 2D. It definitely, of course, works wonderfully in both scenarios. So keep in mind, my exercises are vague on purpose. And the reason I do that is because at other schools, they're quite vague on purpose because they want you to find a new way, if you will, to find and use these programs. And to be fair, that's not a bad idea because, well, for instance, Rhino 8 wasn't designed literally for an architect. It was designed for all manufacturing, all sorts of design. So an architect might use this program differently than, say, a mechanical engineer, right? And that's actually kind of a little bit intentional. So don't get me wrong, I'll show you a couple of ways, or at least the ways that I know of doing something, but it's not always the most efficient way. And sometimes I do that on purpose to show you that, well, there's multiple pathways to the exact same destination. However, let's go over exercise 1. For our first exercise, we'll be starting small. However, our goal is to start working in a way of which an architect might in the professional world with massing. We start this exercise with a scaled space and are provided a base file in the correct units and with some common commands found in Rhino. We will start with a box of 25 by 25 by 25 feet. Then follow the vague instructions below to show our steps in diagram. The point of this exercise will be to use Rhino 3D Space effectively and to show the manipulations that you apply in a communicative step-by-step diagram. The manipulations themselves aren't important in their design, but how the manipulations are displayed and communicated. A minimum of 3 steps must be shown in the isometric view. The final diagram will be composed on an 11 by 17 paper in Miro. Since the final object is not of what is important, think sculptural composition. Now, as you can imagine, I've given a couple of examples, but what the point of this exercise is to start showing the way that we think. So if you've taken Freehand 2, you're probably already kind of familiar with this. We often show our grids, we show the next step, and often multiple iterations of drawings until we actually get to it. How many of you guys like Legos? I know I do. Have you ever noticed there's no written instructions on Legos? It's for any language, and that's intentional. In fact, sometimes even IKEA is just kind of a guy with a question mark, right? Well, it's made so that everybody in any country, any age, can understand what that diagram is trying to tell them. If they see a man with a question mark above his head, what does that mean? He's confused, or maybe has a question, right? So don't get me wrong, there's some universal ways that we communicate. When somebody goes like this in any country, it means they're hungry. If somebody goes like this in any country, it means stressed, right? Or some sort of panic, right? So at the end of the day, we're all human, we all bleed blood, we all want to be loved, and we all just want to be happy. We're actually much more alike than the TV tells us to be different. But in our case, what I'm trying to say is that we want to make a milk diagram. We want to show the bowl, we want to show the box of cereal, we want to show the milk, and we want to show how those things go together. Now, no, we're not making a bowl of cereal. In our case, we're just making a random abstract object. But what's important is how we communicate the steps of how we change and manipulated this object. Of course, another example is just different diagrammatic ways. This dashed line alone helps you infer that this box goes into that piece, right? I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and most of us, especially in architecture, have definitely seen a diagram or two. Welcome, Noel. I do have a small schedule here as well as the grading rubric. We'll get into that next time. But just so you can break it down, keep in mind, I like to do this so that you kind of have an idea of where things are going. But as you can see, we're assigning exercise 1 today with a video demo like right now. Of course, tomorrow is a work day, so feel free to, of course, ask questions, and I'll be, of course, here and available to answer those. But as you can see, by the end of class on Thursday, we already have the first one due, right? So keep that in mind. We'll have a work day because I'll assign exercise number 2 on Thursday. Plot twist, it's nearly the exact same, but different commands. So let's get right into it. And again, this is why I do the videos, so that you can, of course, watch. Keep in mind, I don't necessarily want you to copy exactly what I do. It's really just to understand the program. If you want to take it a step further or do something different, please, for the love of God, do, right? Sometimes I'm actually doing stuff on purposely wrong to kind of show you how to fix it as well. So a small disclaimer, right? Because often I get at least one student who copies just exactly what I did, and that's not really the exact point, right? Not everything that I do in the video is exactly the way that I want you to do it, but I do think it helps you get started. So let's get started. Step 1, create a 25 by 25 by 25 box. Man, that sounds hard. I can't do it. Anyway, so a couple of things about Rhino. You'll notice that I'm in the Macintosh version, which is slightly different but has all of the exact same tools. If you have a Mac, you'll like following my videos because, well, it's pretty visually the exact same. However, on Windows, I'll constantly call out the differences between Mac and Windows. Really, the only notable one is that in Command is on Mac and Control is on Windows, right? I mean, it's basically all you really need to know. However, you'll notice that we have our viewports, and these are clickable. You'll notice that they turn blue when I click on them. If I double click them, it actually opens up that window again. If I double click it again, it goes back to that 4, and really happens with all of them. I personally like to work with all 4 viewports at the same time, but on a laptop, I have the worst eyesight in the world. Seriously, the first day of kindergarten, they called me and they were like, "You can't see." I still to this day wonder how they did my prescription because I didn't know letters or numbers. So I don't know what I was looking at, but apparently they were able to get my prescription, and I've been wearing glasses literally ever since. But in my case, I have a bunch of screens at home, and I definitely have each viewports on all 3 screens at home, so I could see a little bit better. If that's you, you might just actually be clicking back and forth between these viewports constantly, and I definitely do that on the laptop a lot. To our left, we have our basic commands, and you'll notice that they're in these kind of tabulated format. If you're in Windows, you'll either notice that your command bar is at the top or at the bottom. Keep in mind, you can actually change that, and you can work your workstation essentially any way that you want. If you notice you've gone on a school computer and you notice somebody moved them around for you and you don't like that, keep in mind probably the most frequently asked question. If you go to Window Layout and switch it back to default. Very often somebody switches it, and it's really nice to kind of go back to our original settings. That way, of course, you can make it your own. Now, if you're on a laptop, what's kind of nice is it'll constantly keep those settings every time that you open up Rhino. So just getting into the thick of it, our OSnap feature, possibly the best feature of all time. I usually keep on end point, midpoint, center point, intersection, and perpendicular. Oh my gosh, do not click near. It is detrimental, right? In architecture, we definitely want to be accurate, and we don't want to be near accurate. We want to be accurate. So of course your OSnap feature, very common in AutoCAD or even Revit, a lot of OSnap features, and it can actually be controlled at the bottom through this OSnap toggle as well. So if I click OSnap, obviously you'll see that toggle turns in. I'll go over filter later, especially when we get into it, but also a very useful tool. My second favorite tool of all time is definitely Gumball. I have no idea why it's called Gumball, but it's called Gumball. But essentially when you click on an object, you'll get these axes, that blue Z axis, that green Y axis, and of course the red x-axis. Now what's really nice is I can immediately actually click on these arrows and immediately turn, twist, and just do about anything to this object. Now, if you don't have Gumball on, you'll click on something and absolutely nothing appears. So keep in mind that toggle does have to be on in order to do something. What's kind of nice also is that we can scale objects with Gumball as well. So if I'm going too fast, play around with it a little bit, because it is one of those tools that you do have to get a little bit used to. And to be fair, it has like 15 different options of how to use it. I'm not going to go over that today, but we'll go over it during the class time. So let's start off simple, a couple of two-dimensional. Let's just go over some of these a little bit, especially if you're just absolutely new. I've done it basically in a two-step format, guys. So I've called out the command itself and then basically shown step 1 and step 2. So for instance, if I select these two, I type in trim, enter, I can essentially trim what I don't want. And let me tell you, that's a game changer from just the drafting table alone. I wish I could do that on the drafting table, because I was the worst eraser student ever. I'd always had this like terrible eraser, and it would, anyway. Extend, let's check that one out. So the way that one works is I select something, I type in extend, and I click on where I want it to extend to, right? So again, I would definitely practice with these. I know some other computer graphics professors, they literally do this as a homework assignment. That's not my style. I'm like, dude, you gotta learn it or not. Like, you're gonna figure it out, whether you wanna work smarter or harder, that's up to you. But again, some of these things, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Mirror, obviously you pick the mirror, so MIR. Now it's going to mirror this object, so I want to select the object that I want to mirror. I can hit spacebar in order to reenact the exact same command that I used. So say that I used copy, right, enter, and I exit that copy. If I hit spacebar again, it'll go automatically back to the previous command that I did. That's a game changer. I can't say that enough. I love that feature because I'm constantly doing the same things over and over again. But for instance, mirror, MIR, we'll select that plane. So as you can imagine, I'm selecting the plane for that mirror to exist. In my case, I can select a line that I already have, and of course mirror that object. Again, I'm just actually doing Command Z so that I don't mess up my template file. Hatching or poche, again, another game changer on that drafting table. I can't tell you how many times I messed up hatching or poching, only to start the entire drawing over again. And now you have a wonderful feature that can do it on command. Another thing that's kind of nice about it is I believe you can actually click on the properties as well. So you'll notice that we have this little color wheel, and yes, eventually you start to memorize these icons more than anything, but if you do just kind of hover over something in Windows or Macintosh, it will actually tell you what that icon is. But the little color wheel is our properties, and as you can see, I can even change other things. So maybe even the direction of my hatch to a -45. I can change the scale to maybe something smaller, 0.5. And I really just have a lot of versatility with some of these commands. So again, when in doubt, clicking on something and going to properties to see what it is capable of is also nice. Offset, you guys all know it. That's how we can make some thickness walls, all that stuff. Again, game changer. But oh man, my favorite tool of all time, I use it like every day, is dividing something. I can't tell you how many times on a drafting table I was like, oh my god, how do I divide this line by like 35, right? And I sit there and do the math, and dude, all you have to do is type in divide and be like, well, I want this divided in, I don't know, 120 segments. See what I'm saying? Game changer. But again, we may not necessarily use these tools for this exercise, but I do want to explain them, and at least in a nice video way. We'll get into exercise 2, and we'll talk about the three-dimensional tools that we can use as well. So let's go back to step 1, which I believe is on Miro. All right, step 1, create that box. It's a very specific box, so the first thing that I do want to check is the units of my drawing, just in case my professor didn't get it right. So I'll type in units, enter, and make sure that it's of course in feet. It is in feet. Keep in mind, by default it is in millimeters, right? That's usually because most machines like 3D printers, CNC machines, and a regular printer all are actually defaulted in millimeters. I don't know why, but maybe it's a science thing. Anyway, we're in feet, we're good. Another thing that I like to check is make sure that it's in feet and inches. I don't know, if you like decimals, go for it, but I'm more of a feet and inches kind of guy. And the tolerance precision, a 1/4 inch is pretty good. Anyway, especially for architecture. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and type in box. Yep, it's that easy. We'll type in box, and you'll find that the command bar often is actually trying to guide you, right? It's trying to tell you what it's asking for. It's trying to, see what you want. At the end of the day, computers are great, but they're not actually intelligent. They don't really know what you're doing. Even though we typed in box and it assumes that we want to make a box, it doesn't know that we're trying to make an architecture project from this box. So there is that. But we can do a little bit of code. I know it sounds scary, but we're going to tell our first point to be at 0, 0, 0. You can also just click on anywhere, right? But I'm just showing that you can be specific if you want as well. So let's watch that again. Again, spacebar to reenact box. I can also just click anywhere, right? So it's asking for that first point. In my case, I do want it to be a specific size, so I'll do 25 feet. Remember, foot symbol, or if I'm in units, it already knows that 25 is already automatically in feet. Another thing that I could do is type in feet, which is kind of cool too. And again, Rhino seems to be one of the only programs that do this, by the way, which is really helpful because if I'm in millimeters and I actually need a foot, I can just type in foot, which is kind of nice. I don't have to do a conversion of millimeters to feet. And anyway, if this sounds like jargon to you, then that's okay. It'll come up again. But now it's asking for the next length. So it goes, hey, I got the base of 25 feet. Now what? Okay, well, I want another 25 feet. In my case, the width, so 25 foot, enter. And the height, 25 feet, enter. Now, in the top view, it's not going to show you the z-axis, right? We have to kind of assume or double click on our viewport and go, where is it? We'll zoom out a little bit and voila, we have a box. Another useful tool, as you can see, I'll hold my right click button and we can pan, right? Or rotate around the object, sorry. Pan is holding shift and doing that again. All right, so a couple of tools there that you might want to play around with. I often say this is like an instrument, right? You can't just go up to a piano and be like, hey, play the C scale. You'd be like, what the, right? You'd have to practice the C scale. You'd have to know where C is. And of course, eventually you can play without even looking. Now, you got to look at the screen first, but that's okay. Eventually this becomes second nature, just like an instrument, right? Anybody out there playing an instrument? It's becoming less and less popular. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not a requirement in school anymore. It was at the school that I went to in 1996. Anyway, long time ago.
I played the trombone in 6th grade of that.
What was that?
I played the trombone in 6th grade.
That'll help,
Yeah.
right? Especially in reading music and understanding that there's all kinds of different languages. And just being able, a trombone especially, because you have to memorize exactly where position 1, 2, and eventually become second nature, right? Absolutely. Thank you, Gavin. So, step 1, nailed it. Although I like to be extremely organized. Let's face it, eventually I might be making a 30,000 square foot building. So I definitely like to be organized. In my case, I can't stress this enough, guys. You either have to be organized as you go or do the organization at the end. There's no way around it. And I will say, as a student, I really messed that up. I did everything in one layer like an idiot. So separate your layers, right? To say the very least. So in my case, I'm going to start a new layer and call it just organizing. Something that I can remember. I'll even change the color to, I don't know, something that comes up on the projector pretty easy, and a green. I can double click. You'll see that this check mark enacts and shows which layer that we're on. So if I double click on organizing, it'll immediately switch to this layer. I'll type in rectangle because I just want a simple rectangle. And the reason is just because I want to be organized, right? So I like to box things in, if you will. I also want to type in text. And I don't know, say step 1. After all, I'm going to have to make and show my steps. So maybe step 1 is a box. I can also use Gumball, and I'm not actually going to show this eventually, but it's just to keep me organized, right? At the end of the day, that definitely, even if somebody else opens up my file, maybe I got a partner, maybe I'm sick, and I go, partner, dude, can you print out step 1 and step 3? And they'll be like, dude, I have no idea what step 1, step 3 is, dude. And the reason I say this is because it doesn't happen so much in studio, but in the real world, in a real office, you're a team, you're a studio, right? And very often, let's face it, you get sick, and you still got deadlines. So you got to have somebody else be able to read your document as well. So again, organization goes a long way. So let's go to step 2. I'll take the whole thing because who wants to do that all over again? And I'll make step 2. Double click on the text, and we'll change it to step 2. Pretty simple so far. Now what is step 2? All right. Subdivide the box into 9. Okay, that's kind of vague. A 3 by 3, and it should say by 3 grid. So what I mean by that vague instruction is that I want you to subdivide it, right? So turn it basically into a Rubik's Cube. Now, I didn't say it had to be congruent. I didn't say it couldn't be congruent. To be fair, there's a lot of different ways that I can make this box, right? For instance, well, I could even make it up of smaller boxes. I could wire cut it. I could subdivide it. I could move face, but again, I don't want to absolutely confuse you, so I want to do something a little bit more intuitive. After all, I do want to show my steps and how I'm cutting this box as well, so I want to set myself up for success. In my case, I'm going to go back to my top view. I'm going to go to step 2 and just draw some lines. So I'm going to type in line. Now, I don't want to do that on my organizing layer, so maybe I want to actually make a step 2 layer. After all, I want to be organized. And to be fair, I use a lot of different colors, guys. You don't have to be as fancy with the colors. I just like it because it starts to tell me that I have different layers. Some students, they go all red. I'm like, dude, do you? If you're good with all red, some go with like slightly red, pink, slightly pink red, and they do like this gradient of color. That's fine, right? Whatever is your preference. So I'm going to go with step 2, double click. I'm going to type in line. Keep in mind, I didn't say you had to make this perfect. So I'm going to I like to go asymmetrical. So I'm going to kind of do a medium box, large box, and a small box. Sweet. Who wants to do that all over again? So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to take that copy, and I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to hold shift so I can add to my selection. And if I hold shift while rotating, just like Adobe, we can make a box. So this is what I mean by a 3 by 3. Right? So I definitely have 9 boxes, but I need to do that on the side as well. And, well, I kind of want to get fancy with the spices, and, you know, I mean, why not, right? Maybe we get that one a little smaller, I don't know. But again, this is what I meant by, like, you don't have to copy exactly what I do. If you want congruent boxes or you want to do something different, by all means, experiment. But let's wire cut this bad boy up. And as you can see, we have our lines, and they're essentially at the bottom of that box. Now, in order to wire cut, essentially your line has to be outside of this box. Well, we can hide this real quick. So I just typed in hide, and I'm going to move this up so that I can show some of these lines. I can show them going through the box, right? I might want my box back, so I'm going to type in show and show my box. If you are finding it a little hard to look at this box, there are some other options. Now, this is true of every single viewport, but if you click this tiny little down arrow, there's actually tons of options in the way that we can look at this. You can also even set the view differently, and we'll get into that a little bit. So in our case, if say you wanted to see what it looks like rendered, you could. If you want to see through it like an X-ray, you could, right? And now we can see that back line, right? I personally like ghosted. I think there's a nice kind of soft touch to it. However, you can also select things through something, so be careful. It can really start to play on the mind, and you start to almost get an MC Escher, like, man, where is the back of the box? So be careful. You can start to give yourself a headache, to say the very least. But hopefully we can see this pretty well, because I need to chop into it now. So I'll take my box, I'll wire cut it, cut, and it's going to go, hey, what line do you want to use to cut this? Now keep in mind, you can only do this one cut at a time, so we will. I'm going to select this cut, and I want to go straight through the box, and I want to go outside the box. Now, in this case, it doesn't really matter which way. Technically, both sides are outside of the box. But as you can immediately see, it's going to subdivide my box. Now, it's going to ask, hey, do you want to keep all this, or do you want me to delete it? I definitely want it to keep it. So I'll keep it and enter. Wonderful. Now I've got 2 separate boxes. Awesome. Let's do that again. I need to cut through this box, so wire cut. So you can almost imagine like this is the clay and this is the wire being cut. In my case, enter, go straight through the box and outside of the box, and voila, we have 3 separate boxes. Let's do it again. Now in my case, I can cut through multiple boxes, but I can't do multiple lines. Keep that in mind. So in my case, I'm going to select all 3, and it's like, hey, which one do you mean, man? That's okay. I'm just going to select all 3. Now keep in mind, this is what, if you've had practice with AutoCAD, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. But if you click the cursor and drag to the left, or sorry, to the right, it's only going to select things that actually completely are inside the box. However, if I go click and go to the left, it'll select everything that touches this box. Now that does take some time to get used to, but some of you guys might realize, wait, he's like doing some magic over here, right? It's the way that the instrument's being held, right? It's the direction that I'm pressing the key. Sorry, I play saxophone as well. So I'm always constantly using musical references. But in my case, I want to cut through all three. So wire cut, enter. It's going to ask, hey, what line do you want to cut with? I'm going to select this one, enter, straight through the object and outside of the object, and voila, as you can imagine, we start to see more subdivisions of this box. Let's do it one more time. Again, this is the long way. I would say this is kind of the hardest way to subdivide. However, you guys all have AI, you guys all have Google, you guys all have YouTube. I bet if you looked how to subdivide a box, you'll find literally 20 different ways. So again, just one way, and arguably the most intuitive way. So let's take all three, or sorry, in my case, all six. Wire cut. Take our box, cut all the way through, and cut it all the way out. Now we have just one more subdivision to go. I kind of want to keep that though, because again, I might want to show in my diagram that, hey, I could do some dashed lines or even show some arrows starting to cut through this piece so that I can communicate to that little 4-year-old of what I'm doing. At the end of the day, this diagram should be readable by anyone. Seriously, that's kind of the goal of this, is so that even Bohuslav or Escamilla know exactly what you did, even though they are terrified of the computer. See what I'm saying here? Because very often you're going to get a studio professor that is either keen to digital information, or you're going to get one, arguably, who's not. And seriously, they have like rules, I don't want to look at a computer screen, stuff like that, right? So you're going to have to diagram for them what you did, or sometimes even your client who is definitely only business oriented and has no idea what you did, or let alone could read a floor plan worth their life. So there's that too. But as you can see, I can mess around with Gumball, and I could just make a copy of these things. I mean, I could draw new lines, and to be fair, let's do that for today. So I can draw a new line in my new space, and you'll see that I have some of my commands in there. If that bothers you, just go over to the command, select all of them and hide them, or you can turn off that as well, right? So our command layer, and yes, looks like I didn't do that in a new one, so we'll delete that one. But if that's absolutely in the way, you can get rid of it. In my case, I'll draw a new line. However, it might be a great time to explain the C-plane. So I can draw these lines and they look great right here. Okay, I'll make a copy. I want to subdivide it that way and subdivide it that way. But you'll notice the lines are kind of way in the back. That's because this C-plane, which is this gridded plane that you see, that is our orienting device. So you'll see that if I draw it on that view, it's going to show up on that axis, that y-axis right here, and there's those two lines that I just drew. Now don't get me wrong, I could wire cut it from way over there, but I don't know, it starts to mess on your mind. Eventually you get so good at this that you kind of know what the program's doing. But for the sake of explanation today, I think that's kind of the best. Some students will actually do this. Whatever they're working on, they'll just make sure that it's within this orientation, right? They'll just make sure that they're kind of close to the y-axis or close to the x-axis or close to the z-axis. If this all sounds foreign, again, pause, test it out, right? Then go back to the video. Don't expect to go as fast as I do, especially if it's your first time in Rhino. Trust me, I was not ever this fast in the beginning. You should have saw me. It was quite laughable. But we had to teach ourselves these programs. Let's wire cut again. So wire cut. That's the one. Now you'll notice it didn't go straight through the box the first time, and you're like, what gives, man? Keep in mind that within the command bar, you can control this. So normal to curve, and I can actually select the direction I want to cut. In my case, maybe I want to start in the X. So I want to cut through the X, and you'll notice that it follows that X-axis. And eventually these become second knowledge, guys. You just know that red lines are X-axes, green lines are Y-axes, and blue lines are Z-axes. And that's about the extent of our math, right? So if you're terrified of math, don't worry, we don't go outside of that. We let the computer do the rest of the math for us. But we'll go straight through the X and outside of the box. Voila, right? But we need one more, so let's get that one. Wire cut. It's going to ask me, hey, what do you want to cut? Well, I want to cut these bottom boxes, so you'll see that I kind of choose my view just right. That way I can select something just right. Spacebar or enter, click and click. And voila, step 2 is now finished, right? I have my subdivisions and I also can show my work. I can show what I did to actually subdivide it. That's cool. I don't want to mess that up at all. So when in doubt, make a copy. In my case, I'm going to hold shift. That way it'll go straight down. And we'll call this step 2.1, right? I mean, shoot. I don't want to accidentally mess up or have to do that all over again. And gosh, I wish there was like, I wish I had like a future Chris, you know, that was like, hey dude, make sure you save all your steps, you know, because you don't realize how many times I had to do things over and over. And this is where things get weird, right? You can accidentally reorient yourself, so be careful. But I'm gonna start step 3 off fresh. So again, I just like to be organized. If you're not this OCD, that's okay, but you should be. No, I'm just kidding. But let's get step 3 and move on. All right, so we've subdivided 3 by 3 by 3. Great, awesome. I can even start to show my steps, which is gonna be great. What is step 3? Remove 3 to 4 pieces. All right, that's pretty vague. Now it doesn't say individual pieces, and I could probably decide what those pieces mean. So in my case, I'm going to decide that a piece equals that one and that one. So I'm going to hold shift. And, well, I don't want to just delete it because I need to show my work. Maybe I need to show that this is getting extruded. So voila. I'll use Gumball to, of course, kind of show this kind of puzzle-like method, if you will, of things coming and going together. Let's take this piece and I don't know, maybe that inside piece. Ooh, how can I get it? Good thing I'm in sort of an exterior mode and it's going, hey, did you mean this piece or this piece or this piece? Well, I definitely meant that piece, so let's take that one out too. And this is where you can actually start to have a little fun with it, right? Start to make it kind of an interesting object. If that's kind of hard to look at, again, we can go back to shaded and get a better idea of what's going on. So there's an opening. I kind of like that opening. I'm going to go with this piece as well. It's kind of cool. A little space in there. All right, and it said I could do 4 pieces, so I'm going to go with 4. I'm going to go with this one, and that one. Right. Again, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. You're more than welcome to get fancy with the spices. But again, this is just to orient ourselves, to get familiar with the project itself. All right. That's looking pretty sweet. I can kind of go like this and go, yeah, I could see myself turning that into a diagram and, of course, explaining that well. However, I don't want to do all that again and I might mess it up, so I'm going to take a copy. When in doubt, right? In fact, I might as well take this piece and this piece, copy. I don't know, I'm a stickler for organization as well, so copy. Kind of want that exact piece to be lined up with my exact other piece, why not? And we'll call it 3.1, just in case. Sweet. So I can't even mess up, and even if I do, I have a previous copy that I can use. I'm a stickler for the grid method too. I like it all nice and polished and organized. That wasn't always me, by the way. The computer taught me to be this way. I was the rock star at 19 and I could care less about, you know, where everything was or whether it was labeled. But again, this is Professor trying to help, right? Help your future self, right? Help future Matthew, help future Noel, right? The stuff that you actually do right now, I guarantee you it will help you in the future, right? And simply just being more organized if I haven't really expressed that enough. Anyway, let's go to step 4, our final step. Step 4, what does it ask of us? All right, apply a wire cut, and we've already done a wire cut, so maybe let's try something else. But just in case you did another method, maybe try a wire cut now. Or a Boolean operation to any of the operation to 4 of any pieces. Now this means of the kind of pieces that we have right here. And basically what it's asking is like, well, kind of try to interact with more than one piece, right? Try to interact with 4 pieces, if you will. So let's see what I mean by that. And keep in mind, I do have a copy, so I can't even mess up. So let's experiment here. I don't know, let's get a sphere involved. Why not? So I'll get a sphere involved, boop, boop, there we go. Now I want to subtract. So a Boolean operation is either, it's basically math, it's just a fancy, it's the guy named Boolean. I actually finally looked it up after like 7 years. I was like, why is it called Boolean? It's a guy named Boolean. Anyway, but basically they're mathematic principles in which we manipulate solid objects. So very fitting to actually use that. But let's take a look at this. I do have a piece here, and it looks like it's interacting with 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces. Great, that meets the requirements, but it's kind of lame. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Ooh, yeah. Oh, now we're talking. Still interacting with a couple of pieces. And keep in mind, I kind of have an inside relationship and an outside relationship. But overall speaking, like I said, we're not trying to make something pretty necessarily, but we just want to interact with the object. So that might be fitting. Let's work with it, right? So let's do a Boolean operation. I'll type in literally boo. And to be fair, Boolean two objects, Boolean difference, and Boolean split arguably all kind of visually do the same thing, but just give us different outcomes. For instance, like one will leave over the middle, one will leave over the 2 pieces that we came with, and one will just get rid of the other piece altogether, like Boolean split. To be fair, experiment with all of them. I personally like Boolean split the most, so I very often, it'll actually tell you what it wants. So select the surface or polysurfaces to split. I definitely want to split with this object. So I want to affect this one, I want to affect that one, I want to affect this one, and it looks like maybe we have another. Ooh, uh-oh, we didn't meet our own requirements. So let's move that ball a little bit and at least affect 4 or 5 pieces. Again, I'm not going to sit there and count them, but it's to at least make us all congruent, right? So we have 4 objects being involved. Okay, 5 objects. Again, I'm not going to count. But let's take those objects and let's split them up with this guy. Enter. And voila, you guys see that? It's kind of a split out, if you will, almost like a wire cut, but now of a 3-dimensional object. Now that's really cool, but I also need to explain it to somebody. So I may want this object copied. Make a few copies, right? Because I might want to be like, well, I kind of want to show this box out, but I also kind of want to show somebody what actually got subtracted. So for instance, I could take this piece, and that might be really good for a studio professor. They might be like, hey, here's your building right here. Cool, right? I got a building now, right? But now I have this diagram that it shows the expression of how I came up with that massing. Because the first question is, in studio, is how'd you come up with that? Right? And now I have this wonderful diagram that at least expresses what that possibly was. For instance, this may be the city site plan. This may be the demographics that were involved. This may be to remove some of those demographics. That sounds like eugenics, my bad. But you know what I'm trying to say here. In architecture, we do a lot of pushing and pulling based on other outside information. In our case, we just have a simpler object. But I do need to explain that to somebody, so well, that might be the best diagram to show. You guys get what I'm saying here? That might be the best way to show this minus this equals this. Or this plus this equals this. So again, kind of leaving it open to interpretation. But as you can see, I've actually completed this step. I may actually want to show the final model. So there we go. There's the final model. Now I probably should have cut from that one because it does look kind of strange. So I might actually have to go back and do it again, right? Oh man, but I can't get back to, man, where's that original piece? I could just take this original one and try again. So again, sometimes I do these things on purposely wrong. That way, of course, you know what to do when you run into it. Again, how useful that would have been as a student. Anyway, Boolean split. Let's try a difference this time. Let's see if it does anything different. We'll select the objects. Oh, it looks like I already cut this one. What do I do? Well, I may need to either go back. Did I already cut that one? Yeah, I did. See? Now I gotta go back a bunch of times. Another useful tool, by the way, if you're finding it kind of hard to like rotate around something, or you feel like it's like not centered on the rotation, you can select whatever you want to focus on. And this wonderful thing called zoom selected, or just this looks like a magnifying glass with mitosis going on, it'll lock in, right? And that is extremely useful, especially when you want to center, and especially when you're like, you've got thousands of pieces and you're like, man, I need to center on that one. Boom, you can center on it. So again, quite the useful tool, but just wanted to make sure I didn't rob you of any of the wonderful information. So, all right. So again, maybe let's make a copy first before I do my Boolean operation. And I won't be so organized. I won't be so OCD about everything. Let's go ahead and try Boolean operations, and let's try difference or two objects, doesn't really matter. It'll ask for, okay, select the surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract from, and I definitely want to basically pick those same pieces. To be fair, I could really pick every single piece. It's only going to subtract from the ones that it's touching. So if I really had a question about like, ooh, you know, I don't know if that's actually touching or not, again, just select it because, well, you can't go wrong. If it's not going to run into it, it won't run into it, as you can see what I'm doing here. I'll hit enter, and it's going to ask, what do you want to subtract with? Sphere, enter again. And as you can see, it kind of did something slightly different. It got rid of the sphere, but it also got rid of, well, the other pieces. I don't have that leftover piece. Don't get me wrong, I might want that leftover piece if I'm trying to show a diagram. However, well, I might not, right? Maybe I'm just trying to get rid of a piece, right? Or arguably, maybe I cut through that entire one. That's why it's not cutting through that one. You guys got that? Is that starting to make some sense? Because don't get me wrong, a lot of this is being a scientist, changing your independent and dependent variable to get a different reaction. And very often, students kind of do the same things over and over again, expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. You got to switch something. You got to change a variable, right? So don't be afraid to be what other professors call a little scientist, right? I'm thinking of Professor Alanis, who calls himself a little astronomer. I like to say a little scientist because we are scientists. We're constantly going back and forth between different methods and finding what works and what doesn't work and what's useful and what's not useful. However, there is another option, so I don't want to rob you of that one. We can apply a wire cut, and let's get fancy with the spices because wire cut is actually pretty cool. But let's say, you know, I hadn't used wire cut yet, so I do want to do something kind of cool. And we'll take the one that I haven't used yet, so I'll copy that one, and again, make another step. Let's get really fancy with the spices. I don't know, super crazy wire cut because we can. I don't know, you don't have to be this crazy, but I just kind of want to express that, shoot, this program can do just about anything. So let's maybe wire cut through 3 or 4 objects. Let's put that in a spot to where we can at least maybe show it in a diagram, and let's wire cut. So wire cut, of course spell wire cut correctly, but let's say I only want to affect 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't know, maybe it hits this one, I'm not sure actually, and 6. Let's only affect those, so enter. It's gonna, hey, where do you want to go? Oh, that's the wrong direction. In fact, that'll make something really weird. So let's change our direction to a z-axis so that it goes straight up and down. Yeah, starting to make sense. Let's go entirely through the object. And in my case, this might be the hard one. That one might be more successful than that one. But again, I think as long as I go far enough out, I think it should be okay. And voila, look at that, very interesting pieces. So again, I might want to show off those interesting pieces, especially for diagram. Maybe I want to show them like an exploded diagram. Interesting. See where I'm going with this? So again, I don't really care what the object looks like as long as it works, right? And you know, it's not an optical illusion. Very often, many students do optical illusions. Try not to do that. It's kind of easy to do. But last but not least, let's get this ready for Illustrator and apply some line weights. How are we on time? Man, I'm talking way too much. All right, let's go a little bit faster. So next thing, we need to compose this on 11 by 17 with a minimum of 3 steps. Let's go ahead and compose that first. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to work hard in these other programs, but I'm going to go ahead and open up Illustrator in the background. Yes, of course. In my case, that's just so we don't have to wait for it to load. Go away. No! Everybody knows if you're on a Mac, never click while the wheel is spinning. Anyway, word to the wise. But let's go ahead and make that diagram here first. I mean, shoot, it's all right here already. So let's go ahead and start off with 11 by 17. However, you'll notice we're in feet. So if I type in 11 inches by 17 inches, well, it's going to be actual size. It is pretty small, right? So I just want that ratio, and keep in mind, in this first assignment and second assignment, there's no scale requirement. So I just need this ratio, and to be fair, let's make it nice and big so we can see it. And let's start getting our steps. I may want to show that box first, I may want to show step 2, step 3, and then maybe like a final object. Keep in mind, let's try and keep 3 steps. To be fair, I've had this argument with some students where they go, well, is the first box really a step? Again, it's open to interpretation. Again, I'm not here to be a stickler, but really just show off the abilities of the program. So in my case, obviously we don't want to show the top view because it would look like a square instead of a box or something like that. So let's make 2D, and possibly the best command that exists in Rhino. Let's set that view. So I'm going to set up my view. It does say I needed an isometric, and luckily we have isometric views. So watch that back. We have our down click, we have our set view, and then we can actually change those views. I mean, we can go 2-point perspective, we can even do stuff that's perspective cool. I don't know why I have that on there, but clearly I wasn't organized, and I should have labeled that more correctly. But let's try northeast. Yeah, that's not a bad view. I kind of like that view. All right, it's got potential. I kind of like it. You know what? Let's do it. That's looking pretty good. So in my case, I don't want to accidentally move it, by the way, because uh-oh, there went the isometric view I just established. Don't worry, we can do it again. Set view, isometric, and northeast. Sweet. So I'll take that view, and I'll make 2D. I'll type in literally make 2D, and it'll take this 3-dimensional object and turn it into a flat 2-dimensional piece or view. In my case, I do have a couple of options. Obviously, it's going to stick to the view that I'm on. So keep in mind, if I switch this to like top view, it'll switch to that viewport and it'll make the make 2D of the top, which I don't necessarily want. So I'll go back to parallel. In my case, I do want it to maintain my source layers. Super important because we want all of our layers. We did all that work and that organization. And I want to show you why it's so useful, of course, in Illustrator. However, you'll notice this isometric view is kind of making a triangle situation. It's kind of making this like kind of optical illusion. So before I make 2D, I don't know about you, but word to the wise, especially in computer graphics, slightly turn it. And I mean ever so slightly. You guys saw that? Very slight. Now make 2D. That way we at least get that little box in there that starts to make it look 3-dimensional. Now I want to maintain my source layers, that's a given. Hidden lines is pretty cool, and we'll do that for today just to kind of show you. It's not required of the first exercise, but you know, like I said, exercise 1 and 2 is experimentation. Let's see what you can do with this program. And definitely group output, because one day you're going to have 1,000 items and you just want to make a good habit of always group outputting, right? You can generate 1 million items and break your computer just like that. So make it grouped. We'll press apply. And as you can see, absolutely nothing happened. I'm just kidding. We'll go back to our top view, and as you can see, it generated that first view. Now by default, it does select it, so that's kind of nice. I immediately move it, and it does immediately put it in your origin area. So if you're noticing kind of some overlap, I don't know, you might want to move this out of the way. That way you know it's going to generate here, and you can move it down. Let's go to our step 2. So again, maintaining that view. Ooh, that's looking pretty sweet, but I might want to set it up a little bit. So I can still set these things up. Maybe I take this one. I kind of want to show it out of the way. Maybe get that line too. I kind of want to show it slicing into the box and maybe slicing into the box over here instead. Oh, don't want to rotate it. But yeah, I kind of want to show some of these lines going into it. So again, I'll take the entire piece. Boop. I'll take these 4 as well and make 2D. I know some of you guys in Graphics 1 and Graphics 2 are like, what the right? Like, if I had this feature on my drafting table, which, by the way, I think it's actually coming all back circle. I think they're going to go to a drafting screen. You're going to literally use the parallel bar again one day, and drafting will be useful again, because clearly people want to draw. People want to use their skills that they use. And if, I mean, especially Escamilla, who's definitely way better at drawing. And it's taken me years to convince him just to put his pencil on this thing, right? And he finally has. He finally has an iPad, and he finally uses it literally every single day. And it's so great to see somebody who actually has these old traditional skills being applied to the modern world. Anyway, that's just me being giddy. But we'll press apply. And again, I love this tool. Voila. You don't realize how much time it has saved me in my lifetime, right? Can you imagine you had to like draft this all of a sudden? Anyway, but that is what we did, right, back in the day. But great, now we have step 2. And again, like, this is what I mean by don't copy me. You know, we can start to discuss the best way to make a diagram, the most useful, the most simple. And at the end of the day, Lego and IKEA already nailed it. So at the end of the day, it's up to you. But let's keep going. For the sake of time. Sorry, I try to make these 45 minutes long, guys. I do apologize. I'm talking a lot, and maybe that's just because it's the first one. But let's get step 2 or step 3 in there. My bad. Make 2D. There's a lot of hidden lines going on there, so I might turn that off for this one. I don't want to confuse that 3-year-old, right? And I have a 3-year-old. She's very easily confused. Actually, she's almost 4. In July, she'll be 4 years old. Time flies. But that's a pretty good step-by-step diagram, right? I mean, especially if and I don't even necessarily have to call this step 1, step 2, step 3. I could even show like a pie chart and show it loading and show it loading more. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can start to show step 1, step 2, step 3. And I implore you to experiment with that. Seriously. Maybe even try it without language. I mean, be careful. Sometimes maybe even just one, or even just calling out what we did. For instance, box, wire cut, explosion. That might be enough to actually explain to that, or at least somebody who can read, what is actually going on. And it's even a step further. It's even a little bit better than just 1, 2, 3. It actually tells the user what you did. And that might be really useful one day, because I might actually be showing this diagram for my final project one day to people who have never seen my architecture project before. They don't understand it. They've seen it in the first 30 seconds, and within 30 seconds they understood exactly what I did. They're no longer confused. Next thing you know, I'm being put on a pedestal, right, for my simplification and my wonderful design, simply because they can understand it. I can't tell you how many times this happens in architecture where a good idea isn't even seen because they don't understand it. They get it, it's a great project, but they don't understand how you got there, so they don't like it. And I know some of you guys are shaking your head like, man, that has happened to me. I know it's happened to me in studio as well. But let's get step 1, step 2, step 3, and maybe show a final. At the end of the day, I'm just gonna kind of show 5 steps, just, because we did a little bit extra. But for instance, that might not be the best way to interpret what I did. That might be a little bit better. And to be fair, that one's actually pretty good. Maybe this is our final object. I don't know. Let's go with this, right? Just because there's almost like a diagram within a diagram. And I kind of like that inception, if you will. Make 2D, apply. Gosh, it's just that easy. Now, don't cheat in Graphics 1 and Graphics 2 now, right? I'm just kidding. You don't have to tell anybody. But very often, I mean, you know what I did as soon as I learned this program? I'd print it out, and then I'd draft on top of it, and people would be like, how the did you do this? And it was because I was using both technologies. But my final output was a drawing. So it looked like, wow, Chris, you're really good at drawing. Yeah, I know, thanks. But I'm good at both. And what I'm trying to say is, we have so many technologies out there that why not use them? In fact, when I was a painter and I took painting class, I had a projector. So what do you think I did? I photoshopped the painting that I wanted because I was good at Photoshop. I projected it onto my canvas, and then I traced it. Next thing you know, my painting teacher was like, what the, right? How did you get so good at color? How did you understand form? I just worked smarter, right? I still did the project, but I just used the technology a little bit more efficiently. So anyway, I'm gonna be constantly going stuff like this, and again, I'm not trying to put too much into exercise 1, but man, there's just so much we can do with this technology, especially the more you know, because knowledge is power. Anyway, However, after this, we can still size these things, by the way. So, like for instance, I'm trying to set this up. Maybe I want to make a title block, right? So I can offset, maybe it's a, now, I can't do my measurements here. There's no scale. But as you can see, I could start to set up the drawing. I could explode this if I wanted to turn it into separate lines. So again, eventually you're going to start to memorize this instrument. You're going to start to memorize the keys and where they are and what the black keys do and what the white keys do. And when I play this chord together, it makes a sad sound. And when I play this chord together, it makes a happy sound. And those things are in these programs as well, is what I'm trying to say. But maybe there's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and maybe I want to show off the final object. I mean, shoot. It didn't say that the final object had to be a step, so maybe this is my final object. And maybe I want to show it at a different view or a different angle. Maybe I want to show it as a 2-point perspective. I mean, shoot. The directions were vague. Didn't say I couldn't. So I'm going to set my view to, 2-point perspective. That's pretty cool. And let's get that view. Ooh, dramatic. And maybe I kind of want to show off the object. I mean, after all, maybe I'm showing my studio professor. I don't know, it looks pretty dramatic if you ask me. Kind of cool. Make 2D. I'll apply that view. Voila, just like that, it's that easy, right? So again, don't get me wrong, the program is really cool, but notice I still have to be the arbiter of what is good. I still have to find the horizon line. I still have to kind of work with it a little bit and understand what I'm looking at. That's where you come in. That's where we come in, and why AI will never take our job, because it sucks at doing shit like that. Anyway, excuse my French. This is also why I don't monetize my YouTube, because sometimes I cuss. But in my case, let's take that final step, and let's do our final step, which is actually just getting into Illustrator and changing the line weights. Now, luckily, I was organized and I set up my drawing all nicely. And to be fair, we can move and manipulate this. I could add text, and I expect you to, by the way. Like, this is what I mean by, like, don't just do what I do. Like, work with it. Think about it a little bit, how you want it to be read, those kinds of things. Maybe the hierarchy is different, actually. Maybe the final object definitely tells you, hey, that's the final object. It's in the corner. It even says Fen. No, I'm just kidding. But you get what I'm saying here. Obviously, maybe I want to line up something. And I don't want to just fake it. Maybe I really want it to line up really, really well. Maybe I even get some construction lines in there. Maybe I want a full Escamilla and make them think that I did the entire thing by drafting, which, by the way, can be done. But yeah, maybe I want to line those things up. Maybe I want to set this to, a new layer and call it construction lines. Anyway, I'm trying to give some ideas out there, because at the end of the day, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is eventually we don't want our drawings to look digital. We want them to look like they were drafted. So we want to use the same line weights. We want to use the same foundation. I mean, after all, we just took G1, G2, and we just spent literally 32 weeks in developing line weights and developing character of our lines. Why lose all that? After all, the computer's just trying to mimic what we do, right? So there's some options. But last but not least, we'll want to export this and put it into Illustrator and change those line weights. So I'll take the entire thing, File, Export Selected, or Export, doesn't really matter. But in my case, very specifically, Export Selected, and would you know it, they actually have an Adobe Illustrator file now. That was not the case 5 years ago. You had to save it as a DWG. And to be fair, some computers, or some illustrators, if you will, if you don't have like the latest one, try DWG, try AI, try DXF. Don't get me wrong, don't just sit there and be like, it didn't work. Try something else, right? Be a scientist, and of course, experiment. In my case, I'm going to try an Adobe Illustrator file today, and we'll just call it Exercise 1. We'll put it on the desktop, although I should put it in my documents under SAC, under computer graphics, under 2026 summer, and of course my Rhino files, but we'll put it somewhere easy to access today. So export, I'm not doing anything to scale yet. Don't worry, we'll get to that by exercise 3, and of course my A team will definitely get the project, so they'll definitely have to go to scale. Snapshot of the view, looking good. Export. And we'll minimize that. Minimize that as well. You'll open up Illustrator. And we'll go over Illustrator very briefly. Most of us probably... Has anybody not used Illustrator before? I'm going to say maybe a couple. It's definitely one of those programs You do not want to draw in Illustrator. You do not want to measure something in Illustrator. You want to do that in Rhino because it is way easier, whereas Illustrator is much more, hence the title, illustrations. Right? So obviously line weight and character and color and hatching and all those other things, it does very well. And in fact, all those same layers that we just made, open, they're here in Illustrator. Right? So if you click on exercise 1, open, voila, there's those exact same layers. That's great because if you're like me, the student who did it all in one layer like an idiot, you had to sit there in Illustrator and take them all out again, right? Or change and be organized in Rhino. Now the first thing we want to do is get familiar a little bit with Illustrator. If I hold spacebar, I can pan, and that is a game changer to say the very least. You'll also have your tool set here. However, if you don't see yours the way, and by the way, this looks the exact same as Mac and Windows, the first thing you want to click on is this random box that says Switch Workspace, and make sure that it's an Essentials Classic. If by default, usually it's in Essentials, and there's like no tools, man. I don't know who decides these things, but Essentials Classic is definitely the way to go. You have a lot more options, a lot more tools, but the first thing we want to do is make this an 11 by 17 paper. Obviously, that is what the assignment is calling for. So we'll go to File, Document Setup, we'll go to Edit Artboard, and we'll basically change the size of this piece. Now, by default, it looks like it was at an 18 by 12, pretty close, right? So we'll type in 17 and 11. Now that is true. That is an actual paper size. So as you can see, if I print this out, that is exactly what it'll be in that printer, and my drawing's too small. So obviously I want to change that. I'll go to my direct selection tool, click, and good thing I have that 11 by 17 border, because now all I have to do is take this entire piece, move it, and as you can see, this is why I hate Illustrator. It's a bit fickle, right? But it does try to help you, but it's just arguably like that terrible grandmother who thinks she's helping you all the time. Shout out to the grandmothers. But in our case, I don't want to accidentally stretch this, so I'll hold Shift, just like Photoshop, just like InDesign or any other program, and I want to line it up to my artboard. After all, that 11 by 17 needs to match my 11 by 17. However, once I've got it lined up, I don't really need that border anymore, and voila. Now, if I print this out, it's going to be disgusting. It'll be red lines and blue lines, and everybody knows you don't use color. Can you imagine if you did that in Escamilla's or Bosov's class? He'd like flip the table, man. Right? So obviously we want to go to some sort of grayscale, and we want to perfectively use our line weight skills that we just obtained. So we'll go to our little layers, and it looks like kind of like 2 stacked squares. Keep in mind, if you highlight over these things, it will call out what they are. But this is where it gets terribly easy. In fact, you can click and drag, and you can turn off layers. And you can turn off layers quite easily with this little eyeball tool. And that's very helpful because, well, I essentially just want to do a layer at a time. The next thing I want to do is, of course, I don't want to sit here and select everything, because let's face it, this is where Illustrator is fucking hilarious. You select this line, you hold Shift, you select this line. Hey, which line do I have selected? See what I'm saying? Now, don't get me wrong, it's kind of helping us a little bit because it's slightly darker than the others, but let's face it, that's like super annoying to me because I have no idea if this little line selected, or this little line selected, or this little line selected. And let's face it, selecting all of them doesn't even get all of them. So it's quite annoying. So we do things by layer here, right? So if I select this invisible box, and this is also where it gets weird too. This is actually a box. I know it's invisible, but when I say click on the invisible box, that is exactly what I mean. So I'll click the invisible box. Voila, it selects everything in that layer. Fantastic. Now all I have to do is change the color. By the way, we never use true black on a printer. Why? Because it's often way too black. And actually, if you were to get a microscope and look at your drafted table or your drafting pencils, you'd notice that it's not actually true black. You'd notice that it's a slight graphite. It's got a richness to it. And in fact, it's made up of like 5 different colors. Now, I don't want to get that specific, but if we were trying to mimic reality, you got to study reality, right, to say the very least. However, you'll notice that graphite is actually slightly purple and slightly dark, right? So I at least want to mimic it in color. So I'll take that line weight and I'll change my line weight, I don't know, take it till I make it 0.55. It's looking a little thick, but that's okay. Voila, there you go. I've changed the entire layer just like that. Now, I may want some kind of construction lines or light lines inside. Those could probably be done. As you can see, you could become a master at Illustrator, and let's face it, yes, selecting lines is kind of my forte because I've done it wrong so many times in my life. But you could take this. You could also just go back to Rhino, and you could do this, guys. So maybe I do want these to be a separate line weight. Maybe I'll take this line, and as you can see, it really grouped all of those lines. So by the way, you might want to ungroup, enter, and those will turn into these separate lines. That might be helpful, right? Especially if you want to change the line. If you do want to change the line, I can say, well, new layer, I'm going to say second line weight. So I'm just trying to express that you can be highly specific. But you could take those two selections, right click on the line, and change object layer. Once I do, you'll see that it changed colors. It'll change that layer also in Illustrator. So if I did want to do something that actually had some line weight to it, of course I can make that a lot easier for myself. In my case, I could also just change the line weight by selecting the lines, and of course selecting the thickness of those lines. And as you can see, voila, I've got line weight to my drawing now. So again, I don't necessarily want you to sit there and pick the lines because as you can see, this is going to take me some time, and especially one day when I have 30,000 lines. I can't be sitting there. I do not have the time, and I know every single one of you in studio, what's the number one excuse that we have? Well, if I just had more time. I would have finished the project if I just had more time. Well, guess what? In the real world, time is money. They're not just going to give you more time. So we got to use better tools. We got to work smarter. We got to be a little bit more organized. And let's face it, we don't want to waste our time either. Let's face it, I'm going to get one price. They're going to give me $1,000. Do I want to complete that in 10 hours or 1 hour? 1. In fact, don't get me wrong, I get paid more, but that's actually more hourly wage, right? The quicker that I can do something, which is wrong with the professional world. I should be paid more for doing it faster, not less. See what I'm saying? There's a real problem in the world. Anyway, but that's what happens when we, get fooled into giving our life away towards something that is conceptual, like time or money. Anyway, I digress. But as you can see, we can immediately change everything about this project. We can change all the layers, and we can get really organized with it. We can continue. So I can lock that layer. Maybe it's done. Let's go to the next layer. Select everything. Oh, that's my hidden line? Awesome. Well, I'm going to make that really small. I'm going to go to my line weight and stroke, and I can even change that dash line. If I didn't want it to be a dash line, I could change it as well. Or I could change the spacing between those lines. In fact, let's get really close. Ooh, you can barely see it. It's almost like as if it was a construction line. In fact, in the projector, you probably can't see it at all, but in the recording, you probably can. Let's go back to that layer. Let's make it a little thicker. Okay, let's maybe make it a little darker. Ooh, now we're talking. That's a little too much. There we go. You guys see that? Oh man, it comes out a lot in the projector. But you see what I mean now. My gosh, selecting all those lines one by one would have been painful in Illustrator, but luckily they're all in a layer. Next layer, all right, we got some of our action layer. I kind of do like the accent color as kind of like the motion of something. It really calls out to somebody like, oh, this line is not a part of the object, it's about movement. But again, we could do that with line weight too. So maybe I take all those lines, I don't know, maybe I want pink or cyan. Cyan was always my color for my accents. So I'll use cyan, and I'll go with something thick. That way they definitely know that it's not a part of the piece. There you go. But you see what I mean? I didn't have to sit there and do one at a time. Let's try my last layer. I don't even know if there's anything in there. Oh, step 2, yeah, never mind. It's gonna take in all layers that were attached. Don't get me wrong, we can still change things here. I don't recommend it, as you can see, because, well, if I have something locked, it definitely doesn't move. You can kind of adjust things. I don't really recommend it, but, last minute things, it's not too bad, right? I can also add text with my text box tool, so on and so forth. Again, most of this stuff is pretty intuitive. Most of us know how to make a text box. Most of us know how to open and save a file. But last but not least, of course, we want to save it as a PDF. So save as PDF. Exercise 1. I don't know why it says converted sometimes, but it does. Save. I like high quality, so I'm going to go with high quality print. Save. It went somewhere. So let's take a look at it. You always want to take a look at your files. And voila, we have our print. So this is what we need for Thursday. However, I know I went really fast. I know I just went through a lot. Keep in mind it is recorded. But if you'd like your question on the recording, now's the time. So is there anybody who wants me to repeat something or just has an outside general question? Please feel free, because arguably somebody may have the exact same question. And luckily we can get it recorded for everybody.
I'll
Side
side question.
question?
I'll side question.
Okay.
So I
Fair
have
enough.
Rhino 7, and do I have any chance to get Rhino 8?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can either use the evaluation version right now, which is free for 90 days, and you can use your EDU account, you can use any account. But we'll have to wait for Juan in order to have him basically send you a special link so that you can get Rhino 8, right? However, keep in mind, as soon as you leave SAC, it goes away. So do keep that in mind. The good news, and I know it sounds steep, but compared to Revit, which is $5,000 a year that you have to keep paying, can anybody guess how much Rhino is for a student? It's actually $129 right now, and it lasts forever. Now, you do have to use your EDU account, but last time I checked, and that may be wrong, definitely double check for me, but last time a student got it, well, with tax was like $133 or something, so definitely double check, because that's a pretty good price for keeping it forever. So definitely not bad there, but great question. Keep in mind, you can use Rhino 7 if you have Rhino 7. We're not going to do anything in Rhino, well, there's maybe a few things in Rhino 8 that are only in Rhino 8, but arguably you can do the exact same thing in Rhino 7. So if you paid for Rhino 7 and you don't want to upgrade, by all means, stick with Rhino 7. Great question. You get that price, Liz?
I'm working on getting back on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to San Antonio College. I've always said if I won the lottery, that will be the first thing that I actually change. Just the internet at San Antonio College. Great question, though. Anybody else? All right, we'll end it there for today.